So I'm Mark Hosters, CTO of ARIN, head up engineering. So let's go ahead and get started. So we made some changes within engineering, and I'm wondering if you know what the changes are. So does anyone remember from the last meeting? Oh, come on. Come on. I do this every time. You haven't committed to memory yet? Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So one of the things that we did is we broke up operations. We have an externally focused team and an internally focused team. So operations is now 7 engineers with a manager externally. And internally focused, we have, as well as security, we have 5 engineers and a manager. Development, you can see we have 10 engineers and a manager, and we have 2 people with white smocks out in the hallway. I hear that they're going to come by a little bit later and take me to the asylum. But they are here to take care of all the UI work that we've been training you or testing you guys with. Software integration is headed up by Maureen Seiler now, and she's a new member of the team, and that we're in that position. Been with ARIN for a number of years. Project management is Deb and her sidekick Sherry, and of course me. So main accomplishments that we've had since ARIN 41. Our main our main focus areas has been technical debt. So I've reported many times before that we're a version or 2 Java behind, versions of Java behind. Our main operating system is CentOS, and we're running on CentOS 6, and CentOS 7 is out there. We've done some technical improvements, and we've added some ARIN staffing tools to make things more efficient for them. And of course, Who's performance, which I talked about yesterday. So technical debt completed. One is we upgrade Postgres. So we're now up to the latest stable version. Actually, it's 10.5 now. We're at 10.4. We moved to a different high availability scheme, which meant that we can get rid of the 15-year-old Cisco switches we had in place. So that's all good. And then we got rid of our last CentOS 4 box. Now, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we were going to go out and shoot it. And that is not true. It has not been shot. It is actually safely stored in my office. And the National Humane Society of Computers is no longer alarmed. So we're working on some automated systems using Ansible, and we've modernized our virtualization managers. Next, we have a number of ACSPs that we've put out, of which you've probably noticed that this part of the presentation is very similar to Nate's presentation. And what's interesting is Nate's presentation from yesterday, talking about software development priorities, and Richard's presentation on dealing with a website. And we're all working very closely together on basically a lot of the engineering efforts that are going on within ARIN. And here's the slide that's very similar to what Nate has put out in terms of what we've done. ACSPs, which are suggestions by the community that we've done, adding DMARC support on our mailing lists, adding details to the annual invoices that Nate talked about before, enhancements to the daily ASN delegation file, so that things are split out more appropriately for those who want to parse. Revision management for the NRPM, that's really a lot of work that's been done with Sean, but there was some back-end work that was done by operations as well. So that was a opportunity for a good bit of teamwork to occur. We've had a lot of user interface improvements within ARIN Online. I think you've seen that, and hopefully things are easier for you all. Lots of Who's performance improvements that I talked about yesterday. RDAP extension for searching network using Origin AS was a suggestion that we put out. We've had to tone it back a little bit because it was actually was computationally expensive on some of the queries. So we had to actually put a maximum limit on the number of results received on that. We've had many improvements to internal customer service as well, and support for the new website. Here you can see ARIN Online usage. It just keeps on going. So we have almost, well, not quite, but almost 150,000 user accounts now. That's pretty amazing. So I think that's really cool. What's also really cool is the number of people that are logging in over 16 times. So you have here almost about 25,000 users that are basically people that come in quite a bit within ARIN. So this is actually saying that, hey, there's good utilization here. Provisioning transactions, there's the old system, which are templates, which were done in the 1990s. And I must admit, during that time, I was actually working on doing template processors. That technology is now gone and past, but we still support it. And there's a new RESTful interface. As you can see that as over time, the RESTful interfaces has really taken off. The reason why there's still some growth within templates is that there are some large ISPs that come in. One comes once a week and re-swips their entire inventory with us. So there's just, in every Saturday night, Sunday morning, we see a huge influx of deletes and adds on reassignments. DNSSEC, here's the numbers, still pretty low, less than 1%, but it gives you an idea of where things stand. RPKI. Here's one thing that I find pretty fascinating. So earlier in the week, we had the Nano conference, and there was a lot of discussion going on with RPKI. And actually, there's a pretty significant uptake now on RPKI relative to what's happened in the past. It was fairly flatline, but you look here, you looked at the number of organizations who come in, it has increased pretty dramatically over the last meeting. But the more interesting part is the number of covered resources, almost 2,000 resources now compared to less than 1,000 at the last meeting. So there is interest here, and I'd be happy to see more. Whois and Whois RWS queries. You can see here Whois RWS is a RESTful interface that we have that Andy put together, Mr. RDAP. It's a predecessor to RDAP, and you can see here that has at times a lot of use, and times not so much. And same goes with our Whois traffic off of port 43, which is in blue. Again, you can see these peaks and valleys. We had this one tremendous spike back in 2010. Actually, we had a couple of them, which was very interesting. But since then, we've sort of had a steady state until recently where we've seen a lot more traffic. In here you can see our RDAP queries in terms of what's going on over V6. It's approximately 4 or 5%. And here you can see RDAP in terms of its query rate over both V4 and V6. Again, V4 being in blue and V6 being in yellow. So this is a sort of a repeat of what I talked about yesterday in terms of the struggles that we're having, that we do have a lot of people using the services, and we do need to do some defense. I'm not going to go into this detail because I went through it yesterday, but just in case that presentation wasn't going to be done, I was going to talk about it here. So here you go, you can see the same slide. Isn't that wonderful? And here's tar pitting. It's new in some people's vernacular. I encourage you to use this as you go about your business. Okay, IRR. Again, it's increased as well. The number of maintainers has increased. And one of the things I find fascinating about Route and Route 6 objects is we've had one large user actually leave ARIN and go to a different IRR provider. But you can see that it really didn't do any change so much on the number of objects that we have within the registry. And you can see this also with INetNum and INet6num objects, which isn't really part of the IRR, but it is in our system because they're decoupled. And here you can see the number of organizations that use IRR, and you can see that there's a lot of people, especially, there's like 100 organizations that has from 100 to 1,000 objects within our IRR today. So just an interesting factoid. What we're working on through 2019. New website, a lot of user interface and user experience improvements. We're working on a number of ACSPs in accordance to that. And we've been doing test drives. We're doing this right now with Jesse and Jan out in the hallway in their white frocks. And we're starting our IRR work starting in 2019. So we're also working on technical backlog, moving stateless application services for ARIN Online. This is something that's been sort of evolutionary, and this is using Angular technology as a framework. Continue to move to Ansible. We were actually using Puppet before, and this is all being folded into Ansible so that we have a single configuration management solution for our OSs in the organization. Upgrading our backup system because it's really old, and upgrading our bump-in-the-wire DNSSEC signer that we have within ARIN's infrastructure. So we're also working with other RIRs. One of the things that John talked a little bit about earlier was NRO activities, and a lot of the things that we're dealing within the engineering portion of the NRO is working out differences that we have with our implementations of RDAP and extended stats file formats. They're very similar, but we have some minute differences that we need to work out. With ITHI, we're working with our various registration services departments and coming up with common statistics. And with RPKI, we're working with within IETF various drafts, and some of them are RFCs now. Actually, in terms of dealing with ways that can actually better improve RPKI within the internet from an operational perspective. So, any questions?
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. With the IRR data, it would be useful to actually see the number of proxy registrations that are in ARIN. I know that was brought up as being a significant use. Mm-hmm. And depending on the IRR timeline, your new IRR, is there a way to phase out new proxy registrations which won't be allowed in the, my understanding at least, is they won't be allowed in the new IRR, so maybe disallow them in the existing. I don't know if that's a huge workload or not, but I do want to see the statistics of how much cruft there is in the existing IRR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rüdiger Volk. Following a little bit, or Kevin, you mentioned the starting date for IR activities. Despite me having suggested to essentially bypass that activity, I wonder whether you can give some date at which point you will publish your technical draft design so that the new design actually can get scrutinized. I would doubt that kind of the mode for 2 years you accept suggestions and stuff from the audience, and then you go back for a year and think about it, mm-hmm. and 2 years later you come back with something, and well, okay, if you do not do a feedback loop in between, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You are probably addressing at the end something that is not addressing the situation you will have then.
Rüdiger, that's actually not an engineering question. So regarding ARIN's plans, that's a question for the management team like me. And so the short version is ARIN did a consultation and built an IRR roadmap, which is a high-level roadmap. It says what our plans are, and it also does include a way to get that information, use that as a basis for people who want an easier way to develop their ROA publication. Now that high-level roadmap was done after a consultation process and was published. We've had a couple of comments this week about more detailed design information, but there's also some interesting forks in the road about how to do that design. There are people working on open source IRRs, for example, right now, which could play a component but needs to be decided. So if the question is the next time you hear about our plans for IRR and RPKI going to be a release notice, that's a good question. The answer is no. We'll try to publish a more detailed plan. But we're following the roadmap that the community agreed to 3 months ago. Look at that roadmap for now, and we'll come up with a more detailed plan sometime when it's finalized over the next 4 to 5 months. But it is per the roadmap the community agreed to. Okay?
Andrew Dahl, what is the roadmap document?
If you go to ARIN and you go to,
I just searched for it and I couldn't find it, so.
for the IRR roadmap,
Yeah.
ARIN,
Is it the slide deck from last meeting or is it something else?
it's a document.
Yeah.
If you go to ARIN's Internet Routing Registry, I will find it and.
It's published out there. Andrew, actually, if John doesn't find out, I'll find it for you.
It is called ARIN Staff Report on IRR Consultation. Okay? And it is May 22nd, 2008. If you look for Staff Report on IRR Consultation, that's what we're proceeding with. Got it?
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mark?
Rüdiger Volk again, different question. And I think this will be actually engineering. Mark, on one of the slides you mentioned improvements on extended statistics.
Yep.
What exactly are you referring to there?
So there's a number of there's a specification file that describes what needs to be in each of the fields. There's been a couple of areas that, for example, I think one of them is if if the creation data is unknown, you use Z, and otherwise you can use blank, and we want to sort of clean that up. There's a couple of other areas too that we need to work on.
Well, okay, I already have trouble to identify, well, okay, what data set are you talking about? Are you talking about the NRO extended delegated? Or a delegated extended? No. Your answer is no.
Jeff Houston, APNIC, just let me clarify this question just a tiny bit, and it's going to be quick. Each of the 5 RIRs every day publishes what we call a delegated stats file, which is a complete set of all allocated resources. They also, allocated and assigned, they also publish what we call an extended stats file, which is a complete set of all their resources, including reserved and in pools. Every day, my scripts comb that, join them together, do a little bit of conflict resolution, my rules, and then publish that on the NRO website. That's what you're referring to when you talk about the NRO extended stats file. So if you have problems with that, talk to me and I'll see if I can fix it. What Mark is talking about is ARIN's files.
Yeah, and it's
Thank you,
really,
Jeff.
and it's really those particular files that the regional registries each do. We have some very, very minute differences that we want to solidify.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.